Thank you very much also for inviting me and for your collaboration. I am very happy. I am delighted to be able to share with you the results of some research works that are focused on different pastoral models and how pastoral models are not neutral in nature, because they always have a Christian and anthropological idea that can also be influenced by the modern cultural trends. In the past, in the church, there were many pastoral models, and many of them were defined especially by the principle of standardization. So the culture of the time was shared by many. During Vatican II, this type of perception, the perception of this universality, but also the perception of Catholic or Christian nations, started to join a movement, to form a movement, the movement of the Spirit. However, there was some disruption with regards to certain matters, and not only in terms of ideas, but also in terms of models. That is how we consider the church, how we look at the ministry. So I will summarize my presentation because I do not have a lot of time, so I will not express all the complexity of this matter. So pastoral planning before the council was done by simply looking at the past, because the past produced an ecclesial practice that was consolidated, and the principle of faithfulness helped to pass on values from one generation to the next. However, the pastoral planning for the future has embraced the post-conciliar, post-Vatican II paradigm. So what are our goals? I think that our generation has always thought this way. However, I think that this mindset presents some risks, because also the influence of modernity, the influence of this sort of managerial mindset, which was very widespread in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, has apparently had an impact on the way in which we plan the ministry, the pastoral care. If we take Peter Drucker, his model is a model of a rational anthropology, where you have a need that could be a pastoral need, or it could be an individual need. Thanks to reason, can be translated into an objective. So when we are confronted with a goal, we need to commit ourselves. And in order to achieve that goal, we set ourselves a series of activities that we'll need to put in place so that we can achieve certain results. And these results should, in a way, respond to the initial need. Well, I am oversimplifying, of course. However, this is not really the case, because this planning model includes the human capacity of rationality, because rationality, our mind, manages to analyze the reality, so it makes distinctions, it divides our actions into tasks. And also in the introduction, we heard that we have many goals, and they often multiply. And so we generate a very complex systems. So we multiply activities, and in the end, the results are uncertain. The outcome is uncertain, because in our postmodern age, we have embraced the liquidity. So we often do not know whether the activities that we are going to put in place will lead us to expected outcomes. However, there are many elements that are not present if we talk about the Christian anthropological approach. What is lacking is faith in a God that asks us to leave our certainties, our land. And this also bears with it the components of a mission that is entrusted to an ecclesial community. The mission not always responds to a rationally defined need that is then translated into a very concrete objective. Often the values of tradition are put aside because the needs seem to be new, seem to be unprecedented, seem to be original. They somehow show that the tradition is no longer useful, as if the tradition has nothing to do with us, the people of the modern age. And so we always try to think in a linear development, a development in which the past cannot be included, but also in terms of organizational sciences, also management by objectives is a very modern idea, but that also has some limits. For instance, think about opportunities and threats, because all of that is neglected in management by objectives. And let us also consider the resources, intellectual resources, human resources, formation. They cannot be included in this logic, need, activity, mission. Whereas resources are fundamental, especially human resources and resources for formation. These resources are fundamental if we want to put in place activities that can really have an impact on our pastoral contexts. So we could say that there are some paradigms in our planning approach. In the past, we simply transferred contents. For instance, catechesis, we always repeated the same contents. We simply we simply multiplied answers and questions. And in the past, in history, that has always worked. Perhaps in our context, contents could also be ethical in nature, could be legal in nature. Perhaps today, we want to focus on new ideas. If we move on to the second model, which is more specific to the modern age, in fact, it became very popular after Vatican II. Well, we see that in this context, reality can be divided into some dimensions. So, and that is why the organizational logic helps us in this, because you have for instance, the youth ministry, the adult ministry, the formation ministry. So you can have different domains, and every domain has a specific goal, and we can develop different activities that can help us achieve the goal in every domain. In postmodernism, however, this linearity has been disrupted by reality itself, because everything has become unpredictable. And unpredictability has increased exponentially. That is why we need to rethink our model. That is why the transformative model comes in handy, because it is important to have a vision. It's not important to have concrete objectives, for between here and 5 or 10 years, but we also need to have an anthropological vision or perspective for a positive future. And this is also a call for change. It is a call of the spirit that is at work in the reality. So there is not only a response to a need. And this is the transformative process. It is a transformative process because we have realized that our resources are limited. So this process is not straightforward. Often we do not respond to the call 100%. That is why we need to find an agreement between two movements. The first movement could be the linear movement. It is the classical movement that also embraces transactional change, that concerns projects that have already started, projects that are already working, and that can go on already, but they are open to change. So they somehow can embrace change, because at times there are situations in which it is fundamental to rethink our model. This can happen also for external reasons, a change in the context. For instance, we've all gone through the pandemics, and we've seen how the pandemics has totally disrupted our plans, also our pastoral plans. So when we are called to change, we receive some wake-up calls where the Spirit shows us that there's a need for change. That is when it is important not to employ a decision-making or functional or rational planning model, but it is better to embrace a deeper change. So we have to go from events. Events are always visible. Events can be handled also according to a modern logic. Perhaps our planning teams can be experts, the experts of multinationals. So a large event will have certain rules. But beneath the surface, we need to consider our mindset, the anthropological vision of the church. Then we also have not only our mindsets in terms of ideas, but also our emotions, our interiorized emotions. We can feel frustration at the reality we live in, or rather, we want to fight against the others because we believe we were disrespected, or there can be a feeling of other feelings. And at the bottom, we have the level of spirituality that is interiorized in our souls. And this doesn't always have, this can be a spirituality of communion, or rather a spirituality that has nothing to do with a Catholic faith. The spirituality can be based on selfishness, on our personal needs, or on achieving some personal goals. So if we want to have a deep change, and not only a series of events, well, we can start from a classical model, which is the experience-based learning. So we can plan our activity, we can carry out the pastoral activity on the basis of our possibilities, and then we will try to plan anew. This is an evaluation that is fundamental. Evaluations are fundamental to help us learn. Unfortunately, evaluations are not often carried out because even though we strive really to develop very engaging activities, after these activities, we should carry out an evaluation of these activities. This is fundamental because this is also a call to ongoing commitment. But several studies, several research work also shows that there is not a direct passage from reflection to action. There is also an emotional intelligence that is involved in this passage. And this is fundamental when we work in a team, because if our relationships are not managed empathically, if there is no subsidiarity in our relationships, if we do not have good human relationships, then the effectiveness of our actions is compromised. At the same time, we can also have a spiritual intelligence, the capacity for discernment, which is also a charisma of the spirit, and it is not given to all. And it is fundamental to be able to work in a team, because in this way, we will be able to foster individual charisma, individual gifts. There's also another intelligence that many authors call operational intelligence, which is the capacity to put in place actual strategies to live according to one's vocation. But we also have a situational intelligence, which is fundamental if we work in a team. It is important to be able to adapt to concrete situations. Now, this model is not complete, of course, but at least it tries to help understand that everyone must participate. It is important to have the contribution of all the team members. It is important to involve in a team people that can actually value the gifts of all. And this will give us the possibility to get to a model that will be also shared with you. I am just giving some hints here, then you will find the whole theme in my presentation. So after a description of a pastoral situation, when we are too modern, we move on to an operational planning. But in the logic of the spirit, it is important, first of all, to interpret in a community what those events mean, what those challenges and situations mean. Are we really called to respond to all the challenges that we find in our contexts? This might be a modern temptation, wanting to respond to everything, and in the end you are left with nothing. You are left empty-handed. So the interpretation lays the foundation for the discernment of a vocation, the vocation to change. And actually, it is the discernment of the spirit that speaks in our reality. And this leads us as a community to move out of our regular mindset so that we can embrace a new pastoral mindset, a new pastoral vision. And also in this case, it is good to resist the temptation to immediately move on to activity. We need to take some time to imagine the future, a future that is filled with hope and faith, so that this will lay the foundations for charity. And in order to do so, it is important also to experiment, because in small experiments, we can understand if something that we want to do, for instance, in a country or within a bishop's conference, this gives us the possibility to understand if that activity has an impact. And only after that, we can move on to planning tasks, activities, objectives, even in a detailed fashion. But at first, we need to have a spiritual vision, and we need to be able to perceive this call to change. So I will list some of the attitudes that are fundamental in order to move from one passage to the next, because it is important, first of all, to go through transformation ourselves as believers, as pastoral workers. So we need to have a mentality. We need to be faithful to the past, to the church, to the treasure that is the faith that was given to us. But we should not simply repeat things as were done in the past. We need to be creative. We need to open up new possibilities to discernment, to true discernment, and after picking up the fruit of this discernment, we need to move on to develop a new mentality. Then some other virtues or attitudes that need to be put in place when we want to live, to work as a team. I think that we can stop here because unfortunately I do not, I've finished my time, but in the presentation you will see all the other slides. So my goal is to go from projects that make long lists which are only based on logics, and to go from that to projects which are etched in our souls, in our lives, in the history of our communities. Thank you for your attention.